Have you ever felt alone in a crowd? Why is it that we can feel isolated even when surrounded by people? This paradox of loneliness may seem baffling at first, but upon closer inspection, it is clear that loneliness is not merely a physical state, but rather a state of mind. Our minds are complex entities capable of a vast array of emotions and experiences. Loneliness, then, is not so much about being alone, as it is about feeling alone. It is a subjective and deeply personal experience that can engulf us, even in the midst of a bustling crowd. Imagine yourself at a bustling party, surrounded by laughter and conversation. Yet amidst the noise and the chatter, you feel a strange sense of isolation. You're surrounded by people, yet you feel as though you're on an island. This is the paradox of loneliness. You are physically present, but emotionally, you feel detached. Loneliness can often be a silent specter, its presence not dictated by the number of people around us, but by our internal state of mind. It is a pervasive feeling of disconnection, a gap between our desire for meaningful social connections and our reality. We may be surrounded by people at work, at home, or at social gatherings, but if we don't feel a deep sense of connection or understanding with those around us, we can still feel profoundly alone. The paradox lies in the fact that you can be alone without feeling lonely, and you can be in a crowd and yet feel intensely lonely. Loneliness is not just about physical solitude, it's about emotional isolation. It's about the absence of shared experiences, empathetic understanding, and meaningful connections. It's about feeling unseen, unheard, and misunderstood. So the next time you feel alone in a crowd, remember that it's not about the number of people around you. It's about the quality of your connections, the depth of your conversations, and the sense of understanding you share with those around you. Loneliness is not about being alone, but rather about feeling alone. It's a paradox that underscores the complexity of our human emotions and the profound impact of our mental and emotional state on our perception of the world around us. How does society view loneliness? This is a question that warrants a deep dive, as societal perspectives on loneliness can be as diverse as society itself. Loneliness in many contexts is often stigmatized, seen as a sign of weakness or a reflection of one's inability to forge meaningful connections. It is sometimes perceived as a character flaw, a personal failure that speaks volumes about one's social skills or lack thereof. This perspective, however, overlooks the fact that loneliness is not a choice, but a human condition that everyone, regardless of social status or personality type, experiences at some point. The reality is that loneliness is a universal human experience. It's as universal as joy, anger, or sadness. It is a feeling that transcends age, race, and culture. It is not a weakness, but an emotion that signifies our innate need for connection, our inherent desire to belong. Societal norms and expectations play a significant role in shaping our understanding of loneliness. We live in a world that often equates solitude with loneliness, that views being alone as something to be avoided or feared. This societal norm, this expectation to always be surrounded by others, can contribute to feelings of loneliness. It can make us feel like we're doing something wrong if we're not constantly in the company of others, if our weekends are not filled with social engagements, or if our social media feeds are not overflowing with photos of group outings. But is it really fair to equate solitude with loneliness? Is it fair to stigmatize those who choose to spend time alone, or those who enjoy their own company? These are questions we need to ponder upon, questions that challenge the societal views on loneliness. We also need to understand that loneliness is not always visible. It's not always apparent in a person's behavior or demeanor. It's an internal struggle, a silent battle that many fight behind closed doors. This invisibility often contributes to the misunderstanding and undervaluation of loneliness in society. In many societies, loneliness is misunderstood and undervalued, which can make it even more difficult for those experiencing it. So let's strive to change this narrative to create a society that understands and values the complexity of loneliness. Does loneliness mean the same thing in all cultures? It's an intriguing question, isn't it? Because loneliness, like many human experiences, isn't a one-size-fits-all concept. It's deeply personal, and yet it's also profoundly influenced by the cultural contexts in which we find ourselves. Let's take a journey around the world and see how different cultures interpret loneliness. In the West, there's often a negative connotation attached to loneliness, seen as something to be fixed or avoided. But that's not the universal view. For instance, in many Eastern cultures, such as in Japan or China, loneliness can be seen as a necessary part of spiritual growth or personal development. It's in these quiet, solitary moments that one can truly reflect and find inner peace. Here, loneliness isn't necessarily a bad thing, but rather a path towards self-discovery and enlightenment. Meanwhile, in cultures deeply rooted in community and kinship, like many African societies, loneliness can be seen as an anomaly, an unusual state that's more a reflection of a community's failure to provide than an individual's emotional state. In Scandinavian countries, with their long, dark winters, loneliness can be seen as a natural part of the human condition, something that everyone experiences from time to time, and thus, nothing to be ashamed of. These varied interpretations of loneliness remind us that cultural values and beliefs greatly shape our understanding and experience of this complex emotion. They shape not only how we feel about being alone, but also how we respond to it. Some cultures might encourage introspection and self-reflection, while others might emphasize community support and interconnectedness. So the next time you feel lonely, remember that your feelings are not just your own, but a reflection of a broader cultural context. It's not just about you, but also about where you come from and the values and beliefs that your culture holds dear. And with that, we see that loneliness is not just a personal experience, but a cultural one. Different cultures, different interpretations. Our cultural background can greatly influence how we perceive and experience loneliness. In this digital age, is technology a friend or foe when it comes to loneliness? Let's delve into the intersection of technology and loneliness. Technology, in many ways, is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it has the potential to connect us, to bring us closer to those who are miles apart, and to create communities that span across continents. It allows us to share our thoughts, our feelings, our triumphs, and our trials with a global audience. We can find solace in knowing that there's someone, somewhere out there, who might be going through the same experiences as we are. However, on the flip side, technology can also isolate us. It's easy to fall into the trap of digital connection, forgetting the importance of physical, face-to-face interaction. Our screens can sometimes become barriers, separating us from the real world and real connections. Now let's talk about social media, the powerhouse of the digital age. It has the ability to make us feel more connected than ever before. Yet paradoxically, it can also lead to feelings of loneliness and isolation. Scrolling through endless feeds of other people's perfect lives can make us feel inadequate, left out, and lonely. It's important to remember that social media is often a highlight reel, not an accurate depiction of someone's life. Excessive use of technology can further amplify these feelings of loneliness. When we replace real-life interactions with digital ones, we miss out on the nuances of human connection. The warmth of a smile, the comfort of a hug, the understanding in a shared glance. Also, technology can create a false sense of connection. We may have hundreds, even thousands of friends or followers online, but how many of those are genuine connections? How many of those people can we turn to in times of need? While technology has the power to connect us like never before, it can also contribute to feelings of loneliness when used excessively or as a substitute for real connection. So, how can we combat feelings of loneliness? Loneliness, like many other emotions, is a part of the human experience. It's not something to be ashamed of or to hide away from. But when it starts to feel overwhelming, when it begins to cast a shadow that is just too heavy to lift on our own, it might be time to take some action. The first step is to acknowledge the feelings. Understand that it's okay to feel lonely, and it doesn't make you any less of a person. It simply means you're human, and believe it or not, acknowledging this can be immensely liberating. Next, consider seeking professional help. Therapists and counselors are trained to help us navigate through our feelings, including loneliness. They can provide strategies, tools, and perspectives that can help us better understand and address what we're experiencing. Equally important is connecting with others. This doesn't necessarily mean you need a crowd. Sometimes, A meaningful conversation with a single friend can make a world of difference. Don't shy away from reaching out. Often, you'll find that others are more understanding and empathetic than you might anticipate. And let's not forget about self-care. This goes beyond bubble baths and spa days, although those can certainly be part of it. It's about taking care of your physical health, getting enough sleep, eating well, and exercising. But it also means taking care of your mental and emotional health. This could be through meditation, journaling, or simply doing things that bring you joy. Remember that overcoming loneliness isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a journey, unique to each individual. It's about finding what works for you and making a commitment to yourself to keep trying, even when it's hard. And lastly, remember that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to lean on others when you're feeling lonely. We're all in this together. Remember, it's okay to feel lonely sometimes, but you don't have to face it alone. Reach out, connect, and remember that help is always available.